This podcast is a conversation by Julie Benetti and Susan Barbaro and is a production of VI Alliance, copyright 2019. And this chart-busting hit, Alone Leave Me, courtesy of New Threads, is available everywhere. Lao Tzu, Tao Te Ching. We're looking at part 2, numbers 64 to 72.
We're going to try to pull together some stuff too and synopsize all of this
In written form.
And going a little bit deeper because it's just too much to try to capture in one podcast.
So looking at number 64, I really get a sense of the space between, and I know we've talked about this before, words that he says, and one must work on what is not yet there. One must put in order what is not yet confused. And it's kind of the state of things versus the words or expressions themselves. And again, in the middle of that, before he starts with the man of calling, he says a journey of 1,000 miles starts in front of your feet. And again, that's a very popular quote, appearing everywhere, as quotes do. And to even hack at that, which is kind of cool, you can get the sensation of the whole number 64 by just dissecting that one sentence.
So the other thing I think is important is pay attention to the end as much as to the beginning. Then nothing will be spoiled. You know, in the beginning, everyone's excited about whatever it is, and they put everything in. But if you use up all your energy in just the beginning, and you kind of falter when it gets towards the end, or as it moves on along, that's not being in the Tao either. Tao is about balance. The energy is about balance. About you give as much attention to the beginning as you do to the end.
That's very important because we talking the other day in our conversation about anticipation and how you can prepare and be anticipatory and all excited and everything and wow, I can't wait. And then when the actual situation occurs, it's almost like you've already experienced whatever you've experienced and you're not present in, which is the actual situation occurring is you're present, yet at some point it's going to end. So that's more than the pre-part of the anticipation.
So the other thing is he learns non-learning. I think a lot of when they talk about learning and they talk about certain things, I kind of take that as being in the present moment. And
I think a big element of that is you don't get in your own way.
So the non-learning is not following what you've been told the way to do something.
Right.
And that person learns or moves forward the way they know how. It doesn't mean you can't learn from others. It means you learn from others, but that's not, law. You learn from others, but then you continue to learn your own way, which is exactly what we're doing in these podcasts. I mean, he learns on his own. You don't have to do it the way everyone tells you to do it.
It doesn't say he practices non-learning. He learns non-learning. So again, that kind of sets your own brain and mind into a loop to say, well, wait a minute, what does that mean? And in that sense, you're actually unlearning as well.
So number 65, I'm going to talk a little bit about this because I started to allude to it a little bit when we were reading about 64. And when I read this and they're talking about the people who are competent, enlightening people, it says a lot of things in here that it's hard to do it when they know too much, which seems counterintuitive. And again, I keep picturing these words are all in pictures. And so sometimes, like this one line, the difficulty in leading the people comes from their knowing too much. To me, knowing too much is you kind of bring your own ideas and I'm going to say the word baggage into what you're doing because it's almost like, trying to teach an old dog new tricks. When you come in, sometimes it's easier to have people that don't have any ideas about anything, that are kind of open-minded, which it doesn't mean they're dumb. It means they're open-minded. They don't have limiting ideas and anything's possible. And those are the type of people that it's easier to lead. I always say they don't bring roadblocks. No, we can't do this. No, we can't do that. Those are the people that I look at when he says they know too much. And, whoever does not lead the state through knowledge is the good fortune of the state. Which again, knowledge, to me, I could almost call it old habits, bad habits. Someone who comes in with a fresh mind, a fresh start. Every situation's a new situation. And they bring that forward with them. Well, then that's in what he says is a good fortune of the state. And then at the end, if you come in with that idea, that's what works the great success.
I agree with that. The good part about that too, and the interesting part, is that if you come in with a fresh start and you're unknowing, there's a lot of access to possibility there, because it's not, okay, I know this is how you do it, this is the only way to do it. That part of it is not keeping with the flow, and that's not, you're not keeping moving, and you're not learning, you're not growing. When I was reading this, I thought about how visual I give you of playing the piano. I studied when I was a kid, and I play the piano a little bit, and so when I go back to play the piano, if I sit there and I think, okay, these are the notes, wait, don't make a mistake, this is what the time factor is. If I think about that and I think about the rhythm and what I learned and everything else, what happens is I don't play as well. And when I don't think about it, when I just go into the vibration of the music, when I go into the feeling, when I go into the song, and I just go, okay, yeah, I know this, yet I just go in unknowing and just be present, I play a lot better.
And so with this, I laugh because this is what we're doing with these passages. Hopefully, this is just kind of opening your thoughts to other ideas and other potential possibilities.
Right. And then unknowing, we're in the Tao.
That's right. Okay, we're talking about number 66. This actually brings in some of the stuff that has been said before about being above and being below people. And it's, if you want to lead people, you stand behind them. And I think a lot of it has to do with, to be a leader, you don't stand there and demand people follow. You just be in the space, and being behind and being below people, you kind of have to think for yourself, in all honesty. If you're not following, and people, it's the old don't follow me, I may not lead. And he says, he dwells in the high place and the people are not burdened with him. And then if he stays in the prime place and the people are not hurt by him. And so I'm trying to think, like, being in the prime place is almost like the starting point. Like, of course, they think of like a prime number, a primary color, and it's like the base, like you're at the very beginning, being raw.
And this one, I just went with the visual in the very beginning about the rivers and seas are the kings of the streams because they know how to keep themselves below. And I just kept on thinking about, okay, so many streams, because then he says, therefore are they the kings of the streams. And I started thinking, okay, so many streams, they flow into rivers and the seas, and what does that mean? And they're all connected, and they're connected to the flow. And then I just kind of went to the end where, he's really discussing the man of calling. And if he's like the rivers and seas, he's in the Tao. Yet also what really fascinated me was the very last sentence, because he does not quarrel, no one in the world can quarrel with him. And I took it upon myself just thinking about, okay, there's a sense of like the hidden power of Tao in here, and the flow and the movement, yet also in the very end where he says, because he does not quarrel. I kind of took the word quarrel out and said, okay, because he does not do something, then no one else in the world can do that to him or with him or whatever. And I thought that's kind of interesting, because again, there's the non-action, and it could be a stretch of some point, but that's all I could go into the metaphors.
So we're going to leave this one for speculation. We'll have to go back and go a little bit deeper.
We'll let it ponder itself. We won't get in the way. Number 67.
This one is so far my most favorite.
Oh,
I absolutely love this one. All the world says that my Tao may be great, but in a matter of speaking, useless. Just because it is great, therefore it is, in a matter of speaking, useless. If it were useful, it would have long ago have grown small. And when I read that, there's just that power of something so huge. To say it's useless is not saying it's useless. It's almost like you don't know what to do with it. It's like something that's so powerful. What do I do with this? And then I love, because then it talks about there are three treasures. One's love, sufficiency, and not daring to lead the world. And I'm like, isn't that what we're all searching for, is love? We're all searching for sufficiency, that enough, we don't feel like I have to do more. And that not daring to lead the world. I mean, because the idea of leading the world is, what are you doing? That is counterintuitive to everything we've talked about. And then it talks about the way for love is to be courageous. To have sufficiency, you need to be generous. And then it talks about, of course, to advance, you need to stand back. And whom heaven wants to save, him he protects through love. I read this and I'm like, oh my God, like this is going to be the one thing that I hold up. I love this one. So go ahead. Now you can say what you want to say.
Well, that's really cool because I couldn't get past the first sentence where I agree with all those things you say. And in the first sentence, when it says, all the world says that my Tao may be great, maybe because I did the analogy the last couple of ones before and I talked about like playing the piano, because all I could hear was, nothing you could say could tear me away from my Tao. And I was like, oh no, nothing you can do because I'm stuck like glue to my Tao. And that's all, and all that stuck with me is because I think in all the other verses, I've never seen it defined as my Tao. It's a lot of times the Tao. I've never seen that pronoun. I've never seen any kind of possession there. And I think what you said completely connects with that as to the expression and the part of it. And I was just so overcome by the energy of that in the beginning. That's all I could think. And if you've seen any of the sister acts with Whoopi Goldberg, where she gets trapped with the nuns, they changed the song. They changed the song to a little bit religious. And it's just kind of funny because there is a personalization, or possessiveness in this, yet in the description of it, it's also expanded because it's centerized and it's unified with love. And I agree, it's a really cool verse. Yet,
the thing is that it talks about when it says it's useless. It's like you have, like we've been talking about it. It's you can't. It's that which is unspeakable. You can't touch it. You can't feel it. This is everything we've said. And yet, so it's like, so what do you do? Like, how do you access it, if I want to say that, or how do you use it? And he talks about love, sufficiency, and not daring to lead the world. I'm like, that's how you access it. That to me is what makes this so beautiful, is through love, through sufficiency, and not daring to lead the world. That's allowing people to be who they are. To love is to love everyone, and being sufficient means you know that you have all that you need. And for me, if I read that and I get it.
Well, the really great part about it is that song that, was by Mary Wells, my guy. I mean, if you go and look up the lyrics, I mean, it really does connect with exactly what you're saying of this and of love. And again, they're personifying a guy in it.
Right.
And yet this is just, getting past that part of my Tao, I just could hear it. And it probably was,
well, I think my Tao is how people personify. You do give it a something that you love, because we do love the energy. I mean, it's the energy that goes through us, that we connect to everyone, and that you feel that sense of connectedness and of love, of being all of the same thing. And so that's
the funny thing too, is that Tao is Tao. It's not anyone's. It just is, as it is Tao. So the giving a pronoun to it, and in the explanation of it in the beginning of this part here, all the world says that my Tao may be great, but in a manner of speaking useless. I mean, there is a judgment from outside as to the viewpoint of it as well. So this one covers a lot.
This to me is almost, it does. Love. It's almost like a prayer. It is almost like a prayer, like someone saying, my Tao, my God, my energy. And I also, that to me so far, I'm like, oh my God, that's my most favorite one. Okay, so we're on number 68. And this again is, some of these stanzas I think are a little easier to understand than other ones. This one's not as hard. The one thing that I get, again, we can read it, whosoever knows how to lead well is not warlike, whosoever knows how to fight well is not angry, whoever knows how to conquer enemies does not fight them. All I get is in the Tao, all of these are powerless. Leading, fighting, conquering. In Tao, these are all powerless verbs. And so that, because the very end, this is the life that does not quarrel, like you said earlier in the previous one. This is the power of using men. This is the pull that reaches up to heaven. And the way I understand it is that all of this stuff is just powerless.
And also it's a replication of the representation of the opposite traits
Right.
And knowing well and action and non-doing is the Tao. And what is not said in that is the energy of the Tao as well. So, okay, on 69, it was hard for me to read this and not find a rhyme. I felt like there was, and I don't know if in Chinese it rhymes. I don't know if that even makes sense. Because among soldiers there is a saying, I dare not play the lord and master, I'd rather play the guest. I dare not advance an inch, I'd rather withdraw a foot. This means walking without legs, fighting without arms. And I had a hard time continuing, which is the epitome when I look at the rest of this, without it in rhyme, because it's not rhyming.
Right.
But the hard time I had was actually what I felt the sensation of this was like a battle in yourself. When you underestimate the enemy, are you out of Tao? And what is the enemy? Are you underestimating yourself? Are you estimating yourself? Do you lose the treasure of being in the space of the Tao?
So I kind of look at this as that among soldiers, soldiers can also be each one of us. We're all soldiers here, not fighting, who you're fighting. But it's like, I'd rather play, I dare not advance. I'd rather withdraw. It sounds like the Tao, instead of going forward, I'd rather hesitate and stay back. Instead of doing this, I'd rather stay back. Because the last line, the last two lines, where two armies confront each other in battle, the conqueror will be he who wins with a heavy heart. So sometimes it's like by going in and you quote, are the winner, it's with a heavy heart. We're talking about energy here. We're not talking about people because, as my father used to say, if you didn't come in first, you were the first loser. If you come in second, oh no, you were the first loser. It's like, okay. And but the truth is that everybody always wants to win, yet, when you work really hard at something, that's one thing. When you're moving towards a goal, but when the focus becomes taking from someone else, I think the winning is less sweet.
And yet you set two different poles, so you're out of the Tao anyway, because you have winning or losing.
But if you just are working to better you, like you and I sit here and talk about things, I'm listening to you and I challenge you, not because I want to be better than you, because I could say it with this because there's no better. It's an interpretation. It's like an interpretive dance. Whose dance is right? There's no right or wrong. But I'm going to keep pushing you because I'm pushing myself, not because I want to come out, I won, I came out with the best. It's because I want to go further and I'm pushing myself. In that's more in alignment with the Tao. But if I'm going to I want to finish reading before you, Julie, and I finished it, I win. You win? You win with a heavy heart. So I don't know, that's my interpretation of this. Right. Yet, underestimating is also not, if I underestimate you, I don't push you. I don't work hard to keep up with you. And I mean, again, it's an interpretation.
And if you underestimate yourself, you
exactly.
don't do that either.
Right.
So, okay, for 70, at this point, I really feel like, I don't know, did Lao Tzu take this conversation and with his transcriber to the pub or something? Because I feel like this is a riddle. And as you read it, my words are very easy to understand and easy to carry out, but no one on earth can understand them nor carry them out. Words have an ancestor, deeds have a lord. Because they are not understood, I am not understood. It is precisely in being so rarely understood that my value rests. Therefore the man of calling walks in haircloth, but in his bosom he guards a jewel. And I did actually read that whole one because I feel like it's a riddle. The energy and vibration of it, there's a sense of maybe it should have rhymed in there as well, yet in the words, there's also an ironic meaning because words can take you to, an ancestor lineage of meaning, to bias, to judgment. And in that sense, that's not the non-expressed. That's what's being expressed, and that's not the Tao. I love that line in there. It is precisely in being so rarely understood that my value rests.
That's the meat and potatoes. The rest of it's kind of the
riddle part, because there's always a little trick in there in a riddle that gives you the solution to it.
Where do you go with that?
And so that's where I go with it, because that's the epitome of the vibration of the Tao. And when he says at the end, therefore the man of calling walks in haircloth, I mean, it's irregardless of what his outward presence is and what he looks like. Inside is what matters.
So I also get that the easiest things can be the hardest to understand. And, in the value, how do you value someone? I mean, you can look at a diamond, there's cut, quality, color, and carat. So you can value a diamond. How do you value a person? You can't. And his words are not understood. You have something that's so simple. How do you value it? You can't. Again, with the energy doesn't value. You can't value energy.
To me, the riddle of it is that, the answer is the Tao, and the riddle of it is, the Tao isn't a person. It's like you said, it's an energy, and it's a vibration, and it's ever flowing, and you can't, pull out a bunch of it and say, okay, this is worth this much.
Right.
So number 71 is the one that I was reading and afterwards laughed out loud. This is wonderful exercise, yoga, Tai Chi, Reiki, whatever you want to call it, for the mind, for the brain. And it's along the line of what they have, I think, in Japanese Buddhism, the koans. For example, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Where your brain goes, what? And then it's kind of caught in a loop. And you try to, contemplate that, and you, instead of having other needless thinking, maybe that pursues the energy of your brain. But anyway, in the sense of this passage, to know non-knowledge is the highest good. Not to know what knowledge is a kind of suffering. And as he goes on, if the man of calling does not suffer, it is because he suffers of this suffering. Therefore, he does not suffer. That's wonderful. That's
like, that's triple negatives, because I had to go back to read that and say, okay, so he's not suffering. So the man of calling does not know what knowledge is. And that's the kind of suffering he suffers from. So therefore he does not suffer.
Right, because that's not suffering. Right. Exactly. And
so,
yet in your contemplation of that, and even looking at it to discuss it and to, grasp or be in the energy of it, there is a certain energy of it, and it takes you into that energy. It's kind of a transport, and it's a transport for your mind when you're comprehending or not comprehending that.
So I think the question is what is the whole idea of not suffering, not knowing? And I actually think that the not knowing, I was the one earlier that expressed it as not bringing in baggage or old thoughts, but I also think not knowing is understanding that you don't understand the Tao. You don't understand the source, because that's what we said in the very beginning. It's not knowing, the source. And if I go back to number 1, is the Tao that can be expressed is not the eternal Tao. So if he doesn't know, the not knowing is not being able to express Tao. Right. But that's the eternal Tao. So there's a blessing in understanding that you can't express it, that you don't know. There's a gift in that. Instead of having to know everything.
Well, and understanding that you don't know allows you to, know that. And I mean, it's like, then you could have this ironic conversation here. Understanding that you don't know allows you to know that you don't know. And in that sense, you know more. Okay. Yet you don't need to know that more. So it's in the not knowing, and you just throw it all into a shopping cart. So let's go on
to number 72 on that.
Okay, number 72, like the one before it, just seems like a dichotomy of contrasts. The man of calling knows but doesn't know, yet exemplifies it through his actions. And the funny part about the beginning, when people do not fear what is terrible, then the great terror comes. Do not make their dwellings narrow, nor their life vexed. So in not living in the narrowness, their life doesn't become vexed. And the contrast of that is, so does that mean because their minds are open, because they're freer, because they're not trapped by busyness, that they're more in the Tao, which is what has been being said in Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching. And the man of calling knows himself but doesn't want to shine, loves himself but, doesn't have everybody around him honoring him. And in this sense, at the end, you would ask, he removes the other and takes this. And what do you think that means?
He removes all descriptions that have been given about him, and it takes himself. So it's that first line that's just
So when I said there's a contrast between, the two dueling parts in this, I think if you look at the last part of it and you get the man of calling knows himself but doesn't want to shine, loves himself but doesn't seek honor, and so he removes those other things and just takes himself. That's so related to what's above.
So when people do not fear what is terrible, then the great terror never comes. It's like if they're not fearful, they're not caught in it, then the terror comes. And yet he says if he knows himself, then he doesn't shine. It's almost like they're opposite. That part down, it's those first two lines that it doesn't make sense to me.
When people do not fear what is terrible, then the great terror comes. So if that's a statement of action of what occurs, that's separate from, this is a statement to the reader, do not make their dwellings narrow nor their life vexed. And, I see that, like I said before, as if, not that they're narrow-minded, they don't have understanding, they're not ruled, because when he says, for it is because of this, because of what? It is because of us, our judgment.
I understand what you're saying. You're using dwelling as a visual of the mind. And I understand that, and I don't disagree with what you're saying. It's those first two lines, and he started with that. That's that. And again, I always go to, it wasn't a mistake.
Right, so I'm not looking at the first two lines as law. I'm looking at it as a statement. And then I'm looking at the next two lines saying the minute you start to judge people or you think they're narrow-minded or whatever, it's because of that they're not narrow-minded. Their life isn't vexed. So that's why I said there's a contrast between that first part and the second part.
It's almost like if people do not fear what is terrible, and the terrible meaning, if you want to say, a narrow-mindedness. When people do not fear being narrow-minded, then the great terror could be a vexed life.
So, it's funny, it's hard to read this with the punctuation as well, because when people do not fear what is terrible, it's not, okay, then what happens is that the great terror comes. It could be, people don't fear what is terrible, then the great terror comes. And there's no connection to those two. And I know there is, because there's a comma in this version of it. Because that would make perfect sense, because then it's us giving it meaning. It's us saying, oh my God, that's terrible to say that. They're not fearing it, and yet it still comes. What happens to them? Yet it's us judging because they're, unknowledgeable about it, and it comes. But he's not saying, and they all die because the great terror comes. And even then, that would be our own judgment. It would be our own narrowness of mind, making their life horrible and vexed. I sense that he's saying when people do not fear what is terrible, stop. Then the great terror comes, stop. You, me, do not make their dwellings narrow, nor their life vexed. For it is because of this, because of me saying, oh my God, I'm looking at them narrow-minded and their lives are horrible. It's because of that. I mean, I'm outside of the Tao, but they don't live in that narrowness and horribleness. And that's how, and it's weird, because I don't know if the punctuation is correct, I don't know if the words are correct, yet the vibration from that, the only way I can kind of figure it out is I keep on going to the contrast with the second part, thus also is the man of calling. Yeah. So join us for the next set, 73 to 81, for the conclusion of Lao Tzu, Tao Te Ching, the Book of Meaning and Life. Thank you for listening to this production from EI Alliance. Check out our Amazon authors pages for books and podcasts. Find New Threads music and their latest album on iTunes, Spotify, and newthreads.us.